To the webinar number 8 of the Arcadia webinar series. I am Giada Bastanzi and I work at CMCC in the Risk Assessment and Adaptation Strategies Division. Today, we will have our partners from Work Package 4 and we'll talk about addressing Skåne's challenges in Arcadia. We will have several speakers and we are looking forward to hearing from them all. But before we start, I would like to share with you a few housekeeping rules. So please note that this webinar is recorded and feel free to keep your camera off if you prefer. I also kindly ask you to keep your microphone muted during the presentation. If you have questions, you can write them in the chat during the webinar or unmute yourself and ask them directly to our speakers in the Q&A round at the end of the presentation. Now, let me introduce our first speaker, Alice Petersson, who is a project manager for the regional collaboration of Mother Region Skåne in Arcadia. She works with projects and event management in the cluster organization Sustainable Business Hub, which promotes triple helix collaboration and sustainable innovation with a focus on climate adaptation, renewable energy, and circular materials. Then we will listen to Ludvig Sonesson, who is a climate adaptation strategist and works on urban greening and heat resilience for the city of Malmö. In Arcadia, he leads the work on Co-Innovation Lab number 1, centered on the challenges of greening dense post-industrial landscapes, while maximizing circularity and keeping emission low. Our third speaker will be Veronica Lennifors, who is a project coordinator and works at the environmental department in Helsingborg municipality. In Arcadia, she coordinates the activities of Co-Innovation Lab number 2, which focuses on addressing challenges related to flooding and drought in rural areas by exploring the potential for developing blue-green corridors in agricultural landscapes. Our last speaker will be Angelica Howard, who is a project manager in the Lund municipality and works with climate adaptation in the city of Lund. She leads 2 Horizon projects. The first one is Reways, which focuses on blue-green infrastructure and specifically on rainwater harvesting for residential houses, and Arcadia, where she collaborates with a river association in the work for the Co-Innovation Lab number 3, which primarily focuses on co-financing solution. So I will leave the floor to Alice, our first speaker. And Alice, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you for coming here to listen to us in the Work Package 4 Region Skåne team. And we're all sitting here in the same room. Hopefully the technology is going to work out, so you're going to be able to see us and hear us. Otherwise, please speak up. We are going to be talking about how we are addressing Skåne's challenges in Arcadia. And moving forward a bit, this is where we are in Skåne in Sweden, the most southern part. You can't see this on this image, but we are right next to Copenhagen. And our partnership consists of these organizations, and the one speaking here today is Sustainable Business Hub and the 3 municipalities. So us in Sustainable Business Hub, we are located here in Malmö. And Malmö is also one of the municipalities presenting today, as you can see on the map, focus on Lab 1. We also have the municipality of Helsingborg that hosts Lab 2, and Lund that hosts Lab 3. And they are focusing on post-industrial areas, landowner dialogue, and financing from MBS. But they will tell us more about that. But we are also working with the University of Agricultural Sciences, SLU, and our regional authority. And I will just shortly talk a bit about the context of Skåne. Some of you have heard about this, maybe some have heard less. Our landscape is mostly flat, but we have also world-class agricultural land, which is important to preserve. It is also relatively highly populated for Swedish standards. We have many growing population centers that leads to a certain land use clash. We also have large amounts of water in our landscape. We are surrounded by sea, so water is present in many ways. And also the way planning and climate adaptation is done, physical planning is handled by the individual municipalities. So they have the most power when it comes to climate adaptation in the physical landscape. Regional authorities have also certain power, but it is mainly in the municipalities or the private landowners. And we also have water catchment areas, and those are managed by water councils with local stakeholders that typically include municipalities. And finally, some key climate challenges, which we might learn more about from our other speakers. We do have an increased risk of drought and heat waves. At the same time, we also have an increased risk of flooding and heavy rainfalls, both in cities and along catchment areas, out in the landscape, in the agriculture, and so on. There is a problem of heavy erosion along our coasts. There is an expected sea level rise that often impact coastal cities, for example, and the nature areas. And there are some species that are increasingly threatened by changing climate and a lack of biodiversity. And at the same time, we have this competition over land use. And now I will hand over to Malmö, who will talk about Lab 1.
Thank you, Alice. So I'm Ludwig, as previously introduced, and our lab focuses on the dense urban post-industrial city and both kind of its need for climate adaptation, but also the difficulties of doing nature-based solutions at these sites. And so our primary site that we're working with is on this picture. It's a former ferry terminal in the harbor. And this part of the city is set to become redeveloped residential housing in the coming years, and will have a great need for climate adaptation, but also faces a lot of challenges in implementing them. If you skip to the next one. So a few of the activities we're going to do in Lab 1 on this theme is that we're going to build a small forest by forest standards, but big when it comes to the harbor, where we're going to try out new cultivars and techniques, looking to forward our understanding of how we can introduce trees and urban greening when there's a lot of pollution in the soil and when there's kind of an intense hardscape that we might have to handle differently than we would traditionally. And this site, as I said, it has a lot of pollution. So we're also exploring whether we can use plants to green this area while also dealing with the pollution. And at the same time, we're using this site and the urban landscape lab that we are running there to build coalitions around urban heat resilience, community-driven adaptation, but also more marine targeted nature-based solutions. Go next. And we're doing this to solve several systemic challenges. We want to look at specific places in the city, specific solutions, but we want them to inform us of how we can further these systemic barriers. And a few of the systemic barriers we're dealing with when it comes to nature-based solutions in the urban city is that there is a lack of sufficient space, both above ground and below ground, that makes it difficult to have these kind of robust greening strategies for the city. And the space is often occupied by mobility infrastructure and other functions that we need in the city. So we're trying to make sure that we can green the city and make it more heat resilient while also having these other services that the city needs. And as a city, Malmö is an industrial city moving towards a post-industrial city. So a lot of the land that is available is heavily degraded and polluted and is former industrial land. So these challenges that we face in this ferry terminal area are the same challenges that we will continue to face moving forward as we try to green and develop the city. And so our goal is to do these targeted tests, targeted explorations in specific places, but then to learn as a whole city so that we could improve our work moving forward. Go to the next. And if you visit Malmö in the autumn, you can see this forest that we're building. But I wanted to focus on another aspect of our work briefly, And that's this idea of phytoremediation, so using plants to clean up polluted soils. And traditionally, how we would clean up polluted soils is that we would remove the soil, take it to some sort of processing facility, or just for storage, depending on the pollution. Of course, we have other methods as well, but they're mostly technical, involving heat or gasification or these type of technical installations. But since we have a pressing need for more urban green, while also having all this pollution, we see it as an opportunity to have temporary parks or parks that evolve throughout the cleaning process. So we work together with a master's student at the University for Agricultural Science to together establish kind of an idea and a way of working on how you would grow a park while also cleaning the pollution. And so we drafted this plan for several stages where you would plant specific species of plants that correspond to the specific pollutants at the site that would then stabilize them or transform them into something that is safe. And so throughout the years, you would have different types of vegetation that you would then remove, replant, and the landscape would then continually evolve as the site is cleaned, while also then, in the meantime, making sure that it's a place where the inhabitants of the city can come for recreation and also for shelter during heat waves. And so we will probably not kind of implement this plan as proposed, but we hope that the kind of way of working and the suggested methods that we drafted will be tested in further projects in the city. We'll go to the next. And our plan is, or our lab is the first in line in the Skåne region. So we already have done quite a lot of this work on phytoremediation. And during this year, we will build and plant this urban forest at this ferry terminal site. So hopefully by the end of September, it will be fully built and planted and alive. And that's the goal. And we also want to use the planting of this forest to create a pedagogical program with the citizens of Malmö so that they can also help us plant it, manage it, and do different activities around it. So that will be happening during the summer. And then next year, our plan is to focus our attention more towards the marine environment near the ferry terminal, looking at what nature-based solutions we could implement there to enable access to the water for the citizens, while also improving the ecological quality of the marine environment. And so that's our plan. We have more than this that was going on, but we had to keep it tight and concise.
Yeah, thank you, Ludwig. We're going to move on to Helsingborg. I just want to say, if anybody has questions, please type them in the chat or wait for the Q&A afterwards. If you put them in the chat, we won't forget it. So feel free. And then to Helsingborg.
Thank you, Alice, and thank you, Ludwig. Hi, so my name is Veronica, and I'm the project coordinator for Arcadia in Helsingborg. So Lab 2 is represented by Helsingborg, and it is located on the east coast of Skåne. And in our lab, we will be focusing on the streams within Helsingborg municipality and in the more rural area. And since we are working with streams and with water, we need to consider the entire catchment area. And Helsingborg is situated within the catchment area of two streams. It is Vegå that is shown on the top within the orange marking, and the Rån that is located on the bottom. Since Helsingborg municipality doesn't cover these catchment areas completely, we also need to involve the neighboring municipalities in our work. Next, please. So what will happen in Lab 2? Well, the goals of Lab 2 are firstly to create a map of a network of blue-green infrastructure along the streams throughout the catchment areas. And the blue-green infrastructure will include solutions such as two-stage ditches, which is shown on the picture here on the left. But we will also work with wetlands. And Helsingborg is actually one of the first in Sweden to have created these two-stage ditches. So we have some good examples of how they function, and we know that they work. So now we want to scale this up, and we want to create two-stage ditches, but on a larger scale. And in addition, we also aim to strengthen the integration and acceptance of nature-based solutions. And the key focus here is to make it easier for landowners to implement nature-based solutions and using them to address flooding rather than relying on the more traditional gray solutions. We also aim to investigate the financial tools and incentives to improve access to the private land, because the majority of the nature-based solutions that we would need to implement is dependent on that private land and landowners. So we need to give the landowners something in compensation for the land that they give up. And the financial tools that we have today are not often enough to do so. So we will investigate this further. And so this also entails developing business models that are based on nature-based solutions. So possibly then with the help of companies. And we will also explore policy and legislative barriers and changes. Yes, next please. Okay, so what are the challenges in Helsingborg? Well, first of all, we have over 65% of agricultural land, which is quite a lot. And this land also contains some of the most fertile soils in Sweden. So it's very valuable and crucial for the entire country. But then at the same time, we have a very high exploitation pressure. And Helsingborg is a relatively large city with ambitions for further development. So we have an exploitation pressure from both or partly residential areas. But then on top of that, Helsingborg is also situated in a highly strategic logical location. So we have a lot of those warehouse facilities and distribution centers, and all of those are actually built on top of top quality agricultural land. So there's that. And yeah, so this creates a significant exploitation pressure. So not only from the residential areas, but also from these industrial facilities. But then on top of that, we have a landscape that historically featured a large number of wetlands that have since been drained. And what remains today are just small streams and ditches. And on this map, you can see areas that are today prone to flooding. And these areas often align with the locations of former wetlands. And so all of this combined creates a situation where we, of course, face significant challenges. And a few of them are eutrophication and loss of biodiversity, and then, of course, flooding. And additionally, then with the impacts of climate change, these consequences, such as flooding and drought, will of course, getting even worse. Next, please. Yeah, and so here is a more in-depth explanation of the lab and what we plan to do. So we have divided our lab into 3 different blocks or themes, you can say. So in each of these, we will host meetings and workshops with relevant stakeholders. And the first block focuses on mapping the ideal blue-green infrastructure. And the second one focuses on finding financial tools. And the third one focuses on identifying policy barriers. And we have already started to using GIS to identify areas that are the most vulnerable to flooding and heavy rainfall. Next, we have mapped the natural value cores in the area. So we want to create areas that both slow down the water, but then at the same time create habitats and ecological corridors for species. And the green arrows here represent potential connections between these natural value course. So these connections follow existing streams and ditches, but they also include buried pipes that could potentially be reopened and brought back to daylight. And so this is the groundwork and sets the stage for our next step. So through workshops and meetings with landowners, interest associations and stakeholders, we will discuss their needs and the challenges that they face and the solutions that they would like to see. And take it from there. And I would just like to point out that it's crucial for us to process this from a bottom-up planning perspective. So next, please. So I'll just briefly walk you through our timeline. So now in 2024, we've been working on mapping the ideal blue-green infrastructure, which we plan to further develop in collaboration with landowners. And we also started to investigating the financial tools and policy barriers. And then this year we will launch our lab. So it will start this autumn, and until then we will continue dialogues with landowners and authorities while preparing for the lab. And then in autumn, the main dialogue will take place. And next year we plan to do some kind of collaboration with Lab 3, since we have a similar case. And we will also focus on analysis, report writing, and other related tasks. And then by 2027, we will, of course, continue the dialogues with landowners, but we also plan to seek funding to establish at least one of those proposed solutions. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Then I will hand over to Lund and Angelica.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I will be presenting the Lund Arcadia Co-Innovation Lab, which focuses on the area of Kävlinge River. So first, I thought we should have a look at where we are located. So we are in the south of Sweden. We're a neighbor to Denmark, and Lund is located inland between Malmö and Helsingborg, and we are here together in Malmö today. Change, please, sorry. And I just want to give you an overview of the Lund Arcadia team. So it's me, my name is Angelica Howard, and I'm the project manager for climate adaptation, and I'm working at the environmental strategy at the unit at the city office. And I work together with my colleague Christina Fontell, and together we are working with Christopher Bontron, who is managing the Water Council. So the Lund Arcadia team is a collaboration between the Water Council and the city of Lund. Change, please. What challenges are addressed in Lund Arcadia? It's becoming wetter and drier in Skåne. The challenges that we are addressing are flooding and drought, specifically focused on the Kävlinge River area. And here you can see some images which illustrate the most extreme events that we've had in the recent years. So you can see the Kävlinge River, top left, what it looked like in January 2024. And also another river in this area, what it looked like during autumn 2017, and contrasting what it looked like during drought when we had the dry summer of 2018, and also satellite image showing 2018. So why do we see so significant effects in Skåne? Well, it's actually the combination of drainage and climate change. So this image is illustrating what the landscape used to look like about 200 years ago. We had an ecosystem of wetlands, and that were like all connected. And these wetlands have been drained, and trees have been cut down to make way for agriculture. And today, Skåne produces about 50% of Sweden's food production, while only having 70% of the arable land. So it's a very fertile soil. But what happens is when you drain the land, of course, the retention capacity of the land is gone. And it's much more vulnerable to climate change, peace change. And I just wanted to highlight what actually happened in Skåne during summer 2018. So this is what we might see in 2100 if we continue as we're doing along the path of the no action scenario. So it means that we might have 4 to 5 degrees higher temperature. And what happened then in Skåne was that we had problems with water shortages. We had halved harvests. Farmers had to slaughter livestock, and fish death, ecosystems were collapsing. So it was a really severe situation that I think shook us all up. And let's change. To answer this question, what happens in lab Lund Arcadia is that the Water Council, that is like a cross-body supported by 8 different municipalities, and there's like a cross-body functions. We have water utilities, we have politicians, landowner, drainage associations, industry, nature association. They're all together in the Water Council. And because we are seeing now quite severe problems with drought and flooding, they have started a sort of policy dialogue to see how can we actually change the way we work, and how can we actually go from being a classical organization working with water purification, eutrophication, how can we have like a broader scope and working more with drought and flooding. What we are doing then from the City of Lund together with the Water Council is that we're going to be supporting the Water Council and their ongoing policy dialogue. So we have divided it up in 4 sub-labs. So we have climate insights, where we will be talking to researchers about the latest insights. Perhaps we should be looking at creating local water cycles, for example. And we will also be doing looking at the financing, because they want to expand their organization. So how can we then help them do this? Can we get some private funding in? And then we also have similar to Lab 3, we will be talking to the landowners and explore different nature-based solutions models, and also hopefully come to some agreements. Change, please. And so an in-depth aspect of the lab. So this spring we're focusing on co-financing, we're calling it. And we are going to see whether it's possible to establish a climate innovation fund. And because we have the EU taxonomy that defines nature-based solutions as a disaster risk management activity, we're going to be looking into this. And under the EU taxonomy, there is a specific activity that is called disaster risk management, and that's objective number 3 out of the 6 different environmental objectives. And so to have the context, when someone mentions the EU taxonomy, it's important to link EU policy, sustainable finance. And so the EU taxonomy is part of the Green Deal, and the Green Deal is, you could say, EU's reply to the Paris Agreement. So there is a whole plan that's called a Sustainable Finance Action Plan, and there the taxonomy is part, and there is a lot of legislation now which is defining which economic activities are investable, you could say. So the EU taxonomy is sort of our new common language for what is actually sustainable and what is eligible for investments in Europe today. So this is actually, because it's a taxonomy activity, it means that actually banks, insurance companies, pension companies, they can actually use this as an activity to invest in and also report on. So what we will be doing is just to explore this because it doesn't generate a return. We need to explore how can it actually be part of a bigger fund, for example. So this is something that we will be looking into. Change, please. And yeah, so the last slide here, yes, so our timeline is that we are looking at the co-finance during the spring now and possibly also during the autumn. And then we're going to start looking more at the technical parts autumn and next spring. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was it for our presentation about our 3 labs in Skåne. Do we have any questions or comments?
Thank you. Thank you to all our speakers. Also, thank you for staying in time in advance to be precise. And I see that there is a comment in the chat from Alexis, who writes, "Congratulations to Team Skåne for this exciting and well-prepared input." And his question relates to lab number 2 in Helsingborg. Alexis is asking, have you involved the stakeholders in the first phase of planning possible GBI corridors, the network you show in the map with the green arrows? If yes, how did you dealt with the very topic of private ownership? And thank you. And he adds, what a great map showing how radically the Kovlinge catchment area has changed. So compliments, and a question for the lab number 2, and then we can go on. And I remind you that you can also unmute yourself and ask directly the questions to our speakers.
Yeah, so I hope that I have interpreted your question correct, but we have this first stage, we have not involved stakeholders at the moment because we wanted to create an image of by ourselves. What does it look like right now? And then we wanted to invite stakeholders to answer to that. Do you want to add something to that, Emil?
Yeah, I mean, we have been in a constant dialogue. We also have a water council that we both work with, and we have been talking with the representatives of the landowners there about the concept in general. But we wanted to first look at how, just very physically, what would the ideal blue-green infrastructure be if we don't need to consider ownership or other things. And then with that in mind, we want to go out and ask them, not necessarily having the map with us. We don't want to kind of come with a ready solution, but we want to know for us what would be best, and then we talk to them, and so we hope to get to an ideal working solution in an iterative process. That's the idea.
Yeah.
All right.
I see there are other questions from Gloria and then Mosen, and then another comment in the chat. So Gloria, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. I had a question regarding potential monitoring of positive effects on biodiversity. Like if any of your lab, you think it's possible to try to monitor some of the local species before and after implementation and see if there is an effect, maybe more applicable to lab 2 and 3, but if there is the chance, maybe exploiting also citizen science.
Anybody want to comment on that?
I mean, we don't have funding in Arcadia to do any physical implementation of things.
But they go hand in hand with creating because that's what I talked about with this map. That's why we're mapping the natural values as well, because we want those cores to spread along our blue-green infrastructure. So we're working a lot with biodiversity as well, because we want to integrate it with our solutions.
Yeah, and in åtgärder.
Interventions.
Yeah.
Yeah, interventions we've done earlier, like recreated wetlands and two-stage ditches we did before. There we have biodiversity assessments. So we just thinking of expanding the already existing corridors.
Yeah.
And we know quite well that they are, very good for biodiversity.
Yeah, because since we used to have a lot of wetlands in this area, it's those species that are connected to those environments that are threatened today, you can say.
I mean, both moose and otter have been seen walking through our corridors.
Yeah.
Some flagship Swedish animal.
I'd just like to add in that if we don't have water in our landscapes, then ecosystems will collapse. So I think that's very important, actually.
Something the biodiversity aspect in the harbor is not the main thing we're working on, but something that we have been in dialogue with researchers about is the issue of connectivity, whether this type of intervention, even though it's not the ecologically preferred alternative, it does provide some sort of habitat for species or connects it to others. And that we might do something connected to that when we have the solution in place.
Thank you. Then maybe we can ask Mosen next about the question.
Yes, thank you for the very good presentation. It was clear and very easy to follow the things that you were presenting. Just some points which was coming to my mind. One was the connection between the labs. When we are speaking and looking at it from the system change perspective, then I would like to see how do you see the connection between these labs and how they can really exchange ideas. I see in one of the presentations there's going to be a collaboration between lab 1 and 2, but I didn't see that much of detail how they are really going to connect with each other. And even because if you're really looking at the whole region, then more synergy and more exchange of idea would be really interesting to see how they are really going to feed to each other and really using those exchange of idea and experiences. The other point, just as a follow-up to what Alexis was saying, if you're really looking at it from the co-creation perspective and looking at it from the perspective that we are also want to see the scaling up and scaling out those examples, I think it's really important to see these co-creation is happening from the very earliest stage, to see what are the needs, what are the concerns, rather than checking something and then going out to the stakeholders. So what do you think? Do you think that you can bring more stakeholders from the earliest stages and the design of the things? That's another thing, and specifically, again, related to my question, the first one, because when bringing more stakeholders, these exchanging of ideas between the labs is also going to be very important. Thank you. If we can have a bit of more explanation about these 2 points, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, there were a few questions. Can I say something? And then, so regarding connecting learning and the lab to the region and between the labs, there will be activities, and we have had activities continually where the labs and the partners meet up and visit each other's locations and talk about the learnings. And there will definitely be more. We have met with other municipalities in the region, and we will continue to do these things. It's very much a communication effort that Sustainable Business Hub is leading the communication. We are all working on it. And there's a few other mentions we can make for the other things, but did you want to add something, Ludwig?
Yeah, just that the Arcadia project is one thing we do, but our cities work on a lot of things. And we in Malmö have an urban focus in this project, and Helsingborg similarly has the exact same harbor site in their city. So we will, of course, exchange and work together with them, maybe not in the Arcadia project, but maybe through the Arcadia project. And similarly, we also have places with agricultural land and wetlands and streams that we manage. So I think it's the Arcadia project becomes a patchwork of different types of site that we all share. And so the learnings can then be distributed, not maybe to the individuals involved in the project, but to other individuals who work in the organizations.
Yeah. And I can also mention as an example regarding how to work with stakeholders. Malmö has had workshops with private property owners in collaboration with Greater Copenhagen, for example. And we're doing these things also continually, and municipalities are doing it. And also something that could be mentioned is that Region Skåne, the regional authority, they are also a partner in this project, an associated partner, and they are currently updating the regional plan for Skåne. And that regional plan is basically a guiding plan for all master plans for all municipalities in Skåne. And they are definitely looking at this project and the labs as a way for them to learn how to work with climate adaptation and nature-based solutions from the perspective of the municipalities. So there is like a co-learning regionally and the municipalities that we aim to support and promote for sure. Anything else?
Thank you. Just one point which comes to my mind is it would be great if you can also, maybe for the next session that we have an opportunity to learn from your region, if you can also give a bit of more example and how systematically you are connecting the things. That experience also is going to be very valuable in a way that to see how this system working that you are now doing in the region is working, and what are your lessons learned for those, let's say, interaction between different labs. And I understood from your explanation that you have done kind of a nature-based solution mapping in the region, which is really helping you to see how the current one and the one in the Arcadia could be linked with those other nature-based solution which is happening, which was a very good example that you said that you are trying to not really limiting yourself to the Arcadia nature-based solution, but you're also looking at beyond and try to connect to those ones. So that would be great if you will maybe when we are progressing more, knowing more about this connection and how these things are getting connected. Thank you.
Yes, we for sure want to invite Region Skåne to speak here too at some point or talk more about their experiences. It is quite early in their process as well, so that's why they are not speaking here today. But yes.
Yeah, and I mean this. When you talk about synergies and systems, then I think about, of course, the big question is how do we achieve transformation as a society as a whole, and how do we deliver on these 150 regions that should become climate resilient 2030? And I think I would like to say that what's happening now in the Water Council, there's a lot of water councils set up around in Sweden and Denmark, and perhaps it's similar in the rest of Europe. And I think it's very interesting that the Water Council is actually now saying, but actually we need to change how we work, and we need to do this in a new way, and we need more funding. So we will actually describe how that process is happening, and we will also describe like a water dialogue, and we will try to describe how this is happening so that we can share that in Sweden, and perhaps it's interesting for other countries with similar setups. So I think that's a way that we see it as like a system and as a scale up kind of. Yeah, I hope that gives you how we see that.
Mm-hmm. And I see we have a question from Gary Banta at SDU. He was wondering about our experiences in transitioning from focusing climate risks on too much water to now also having to worry about drought and heat issues, which is not typically a Scandinavian concern. And Ludwig?
I mean, on the heat, it has been a process in this past years to get people on board with that it is an issue that we actually face. And we've worked a lot on kind of drafting the the right arguments, and also explaining that it's primarily vulnerable groups where it's an issue, that we haven't have a kind of targeted idea of how we work with heat, that it's in the kind of close term time frame won't be an issue for everyone, but it will be an issue for the most vulnerable, and that's the direction we need to take. But I mean, as a city, Malmö has nationalities from all over the globe, and so they come with experiences of heat, both in that they know it's an issue, but also with a lot of kind of behaviors and ideas of how to shield the city from heat. So we're kind of trying to draw on our kind of diversity as a strength in that on that issue. But yeah, it's definitely a newer issue for us than water-related issues.
If I can add a follow-up question, thank you very much. And it's nice to see you all again. So thanks for visiting. But I also was fascinated by this problem we have on the landscape of we're traditionally worried about too much water and draining and things like that. And now we have drought and too little water, so that whether we in Scandinavia are at all geared to this wider range of water tension and water associated risks. So I think we should share experiences there.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sasha?
Okay, then we go to
Alexis.
Erwin. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we had a meeting, Veronica and I had a meeting with stakeholders in our water council just before Christmas about measures against flood in parts of the river. And I can just say, since I've been working with the Water Council, I started working like 5 years ago, and now the attitude has changed significantly. I can really see that they see, oh, it's becoming a problem, and they don't really know what to do, and they look to us for help. So it's a completely, when they before were a little bit anti and a bit against, now they're kind of really interested in working with us. So the times are on our side, I would say. And we also just finished a big wetland area that can be used for irrigation as well for the farmer, which is also a new thing, which I think we're going to see more of. So yeah, as Ludwig said, we don't only work in Arcadia, we also do other things which kind of go into each other, which maybe not are funded by Arcadia, that's why we don't mention it, but we're still doing all these other things as well.
Okay, thank you.
We
Then
have
Erwin.
another question from Erwin. So please, Erwin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation. I want to mention
Can't hear. Erwin, I'm sorry, we can't really hear you. It's like very low volume. Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this great presentation. I just want to mention we have the same situation in Austria, here in the main area of the food production from your country. And therefore, I think you should involve the land owners and users from the beginning, because if you want them to make a transition and you don't take it from the beginning, it will be difficult to change their mindset. No? And also, I think it will be very good to use nature-based solutions from the organic farming and from the regenerative farming systems in your country. Thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So as I said in my presentation, we will invite, or we already have spoken to a lot of landowners about where they have the most issues with, for example, flooding. But we also want to do a list that we have been planning to do according to which landowners that we can see is in the most vulnerable area, you can say. So we wanted to contact the right landowners as well, because there's about several hundred landowners, so we can't contact them all at the same time. So that's why we've been starting to mapping out and see which landowners are in the most vulnerable position and which should we start to contact, and who is the most important, and who is most likely to want help with the solutions. Yeah, so that's why.
Yeah, and I just agree on this comment on regenerative agriculture. I know there is a man called Gabe Brown who has written a book that I think is called something Dirty Soil or something like that. And if there is time, it would be very interesting to invite him, for example, for a speech. I know someone who knows someone. So yeah, but yeah, I completely agree on that. Also because we need to have moisture in the soil is very important, and we have a problem with this here, and we clearly saw that during summer 2018. So yeah, I agree on that.
Thank you.
Arianna?
Thank you for the presentation. It was really informative about the Conversion Lab, very clear. So we were wondering here on the Italian side, we were chatting while listening to the webinar about the role of the Water Council, because we, in Italy, we have a so-called river agreement or river contracts that is a voluntary activity that ideally puts together all the stakeholders insisting in a certain river I can't think of the name, piece, not the whole river basin, but just the river piece. So it can be the farmers, citizens, companies, public institutions, but it's on a voluntary basis. And it's, of course, they have to draw a plan to enhance the environment of the river, the biodiversity, but also to foster local economy and this is a very difficult institution. It's very difficult to progress with these river contracts, and also they do not have budget. So I was wondering about the role of Water Council. If it is something like this that helps engaging, and if it is voluntary or not, funded or not. So just.
It is voluntary. I'm kind of coordinating the Water Council in Helsingborg. It is voluntary, and it looks a bit different in every catchment area. How the municipalities in that catchment area have chosen to organize themselves. Some are quite well funded. Some are not funded at all. It really depends a bit where you are. Here in Skåne, we traditionally have well-organized and well-funded water councils. In other parts of the country, it looks a bit different. But here we have the municipalities are members. Then you have stakeholder organizations from the landowners, the Farmers Association, but also nature conservation associations, the sport fisher association, everybody who has an interest. Sometimes also industries who discharge things into the river. Everybody that has a stake is usually a member of the Water Council, and in our case, it's responsible for the monitoring program. And we have also have money to do like measures like recreating wetland, or like working with towards a good ecological status in the Water Framework Directive. Information. It's a little bit different, but Angelica wants to add something.
Yeah, I just want to add, exactly. It's just like Daniel says, and just to give you some numbers. So in the Kävlinge River, there are 8 municipalities, so it's upstreams and downstreams neighbors, and it's about 6 million Swedish kronor a year. That's the total budget, and what would that be, like 600,000?
600,000.
600,000 euros per year, and there is, I think that's funding about one person and then different measures. But this is something that
Thank you.
municipalities are all benefiting from this, because those who are downstreams have realized that the upstreams neighbors are paying, but they also help in the downstreams to not get flooded. You know the logic. So, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not like a state mandatory thing. It is completely voluntary.
Thank you very much. We have time for the last questions. At the end of the webinar, we need a few minutes for updates for the region and the Arcadia Consortium. So our last question from Fulvio is gone.
Yeah, thank you, Giada, and thank you all for the nice presentation. Just a quick question because I was very curious about Lab 1. Maybe I missed this aspect, but I'm curious about your experience engaging with citizens and stakeholders on the urban pollution problem prior to Arcadia. This is linked also to the comment made by Mosen. So did the concept of the urban park solution emerge through dialogue with them on the problem of urban pollution? And whether you are able to describe public perception of this approach compared to traditional remediation, because I was thinking in terms of pace at which the pollution problem is addressed, but also the perceived effectiveness of, let's say, phytoremediation compared to traditional techniques. Thank you.
I think like the soil pollution is not the type of pollution that the citizens are most engaged on. Like it's more air pollution, noise pollution, and visible pollution. I mean, the soil pollution is invisible. So I think most of the citizens of Malmö are quite unaware that soil is polluted. So it wasn't something that we've engaged with them on. We're more hearing them on the need for more green spaces in the city. And that's something they clearly express in every dialogue we have with them. And then are trying to abate this pollution problem in a way that works towards their interests. And it's the kind of co-creative activities will mostly happen this year when we are building the forest. The area that we are working in has very few residents now. So there's not this clear kind of citizen population that we can engage with yet. It's mostly other stakeholders, companies and property owners that are on site that we've been engaging with so far. But the idea is that this year we will do more of that type of activity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I would really like to thank all of our speakers for sharing these valuable insights and also for sparking an engaging discussion. If you have any other question, feel free to write them in the chat or to send us an email to the Arcadia Work Package 6 email address, and we will direct them to our speakers. Before closing, I would just quickly show you the next appointments for our partners. So I will briefly share my screen. Okay. On February the 2nd, we will hold our first progress meeting for the model and fellow regions, and we will ask model regions to prepare a brief presentation with updates on their co-innovation labs, but further details we will follow via email in the coming days, so you will stay updated. During this meeting, we will also collect feedback from all the regions, present a table of content for the deliverable X.2, and also discuss the planning of Work Package 6 webinars and meeting for 2025. Regarding upcoming meetings, we are planning to dedicate our next 3 sessions prior to the General Assembly to presenting the deliverables from the cross-cutting work packages, so the work packages 7 to 9. We are confident that these meetings will provide valuable insights for the regions and also help them integrate the results into their innovation labs, which are ongoing. So February the 20th, we will have the first presentation from Work Package 7 on the guidance and scorecard readiness assessment of transformative change across regions. We will also share the complete schedule very soon. And for any further information, as usual, you can contact us at the email address that you can find in the chat. I see that we have a question from Alice.
Yes, and I think someone else mentioned it in the chat too, but February the 2nd is a Sunday. Is that the correct date?
Maybe it's not. It's the Thursday. Of course, it's not. It's Sunday, so it might be the
Sixth.
first, six exactly, the first Thursday of
February
February, so the
6th.
6th. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If there are no other questions or issues, with that, I thank you all our speakers, and I thank you all for attending this webinar. And I wish you a great rest of the day. See you soon at the progress meeting and at our next appointments with the cross-cutting work packages.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.